Okay, in this video we're going to look at how we can use variables to make your code more efficient and dynamic, which is something we should always be aiming for. We're going to look at how we can divide up our code better, just for better coding, how we can use functions a little bit more, how we can access functions in other scripts, and finally we'll do a little bit more commenting just to make sure everything's nice and tidy. As the game currently is, we generate the 5 pickups, but if I collect them all, nothing says that I've won. Okay, the main reason for that is that if we look over in our game manager script and our player script, player controller, currently it is set as 12 here, and so if I could manually change that to, let's say, 4, and then if I go back to the game, when I get to 4 it wins. However, there's 2 problems with that. One, in all honesty, there's no reason for the player controller to be aware if the player has won or lost. It's not the player controller's job. The player controller's job should be very much just controlling the player. Okay, so we need to move this piece of code out of here and into the game manager. And while we're doing that, we can also make it so this is more dynamic. At the moment, we would have to hard code 4 into there, but we already have a variable over here, number of pickups, that says how many pickups there are. In this case, there's 5. So by moving the code from here over into here, we can satisfy both those problems. We can use this variable, and it's also centralized within the game manager, which is the script that should be handling this. So we're going to start by trying to move the code across. There'll just be a lot of cutting and pasting really going on first. So if we go over into the player controller, let's look at the variables. We're going to need probably these 3 variables, because that's the text that displays, that's the win text, and that's the count. Those are all going to be part of the game manager. So I'll just cut those out. I'm going to go over to the game manager and I'm going to paste them down here. I'm going to give that a comment straight away. So variables to deal with the progression of the game. Okay, that's good. And from player controller at the top, we imported this, or not imported, but we're using this particular script engine. So we can cut that from there and paste that into the top of there. These things can be copied from the start and paste it into the start of this one. We'll just put it below there. We can tidy this up a bit later. Scrolling down, that's fine, that's to do with the movement. On trigger, I'm going to, for now, I'm going to copy out set count text, and I will paste that in at the bottom of the game manager. Okay, and I'm over here. I'm going to leave this here, okay, because that'll turn off the on the collision with the pickup, that'll turn off its visibility. But these things here really shouldn't be there, because count is part of checking the win state and it's updating the text. So I'm just going to comment them out for now. Okay, I don't think there's anything in there now that will cause a problem. Come back over here. Let's go back into Unity. Cool, no errors. That's good. Alright, so now if we look at the game manager, you can see there's a reference to the count text and the win text. Alright, which we need to drag across from here. So count text goes into there, win text goes into there. Okay, and now if we play that, the win text is no longer there because that has been set inside the game manager. Alright, so player controller is pretty much done for now, so let's just look at game manager. So inside the game manager, here at the beginning here we're setting win text dot text equals nothing. We've also set count to equal 0 when it first starts. One of the problems we have now is this is never being called. Well, it's been called from there, so when it first starts, it sets count to equal. So it's this piece of text here, if you remember that when we first run the game, sets this to equal 0. However, that's not updating. If I do the pickups, I'm never going to win because this variable never gets updated. Count never gets updated. So now this step here is a little bit confusing. We need to make it so that on player controller, because player controller is aware that when it collides with a pickup, that's what this piece of code does here. This piece of code will still be working because it's still disappearing. But we need to then somehow talk to game manager over here and tell game manager to increment the count variable, which is now stored in here, now stored in the game manager, and then check if we've won or not. Okay, so what we need to do over in the player controller, and this is where it gets slightly confusing, we need to get a reference to the game manager. Okay, the way we're going to do that is we're going to type in public. There's a couple of ways to do that. I'm going to do it through code. That way you can just more or less type out what I've got. Game manager. So the object that we're declaring is of type game manager, and just to keep it simple, we're going to call it game manager. Okay, so we're declaring a new variable here called game manager of type game manager, but at the moment it's an empty variable. It's got a type, but it doesn't actually have anything stored in it. So in the start, we're going to store that. So we're going to say game manager equals. Now, what do we want to get? We want to find the game object. So you think that you start big, go small. So the biggest object you can have is a game object. Dot. And what do we want to do? We want to find the script that we created called game manager. This script, this name here, will correspond to the name over in here called game manager. Okay, quite possibly I need to put no space in there. Okay, so we're starting big. We're looking through all the game objects inside the game. We're looking for the script called game manager. Yeah, and then inside there we want to get a. Sorry, I need to put a bracket there. Dot. All right, so it gives me help there. Get component. And the component type that we're actually looking for is a game manager. And then squiggle. Okay, I know that's a little bit confusing, but pretty much if you want to reference another script, you can just repeat this. You don't have to 100% understand how it works, just be aware that this is what you need to do. So there's two steps. One, you need to create a variable of type game manager, which you're going to call game manager. Then over here you need to store a reference to our game manager in that variable. So that starts off big. The biggest thing in the game are the game objects. All right. If we go back to Unity, these are all game objects. All right. So we're starting by looking through all the different game objects, and then we're looking for the one called, we said find game manager, which is this. Yep. And then inside that, we want to get the component, which is called game manager. Okay. which is the components, the script's names there. Okay, so just to confirm that this works, nothing will actually happen. This is just, once again, an expected test. Alright, we're going to go back to Unity. No errors. So that's a good thing. Okay, so now that we have a reference to that that game manager and it's stored in game manager, now to show you how this works, we need to go over to the game manager. We want to be able to access set count text. Actually, we're going to create a new function. We're going to make it public because we want to be able to access this function called increase count. Okay, this increase count is going to take count and equals count plus 1. Yeah, and then it is going to call set count text. So if I save that now, if I called increase count from here, and I'll comment out that line. Okay, so what that will do is it'll call this function increase count, which will increase count by 1, and then it'll call this function which displays the text. Oh, we've got an error here. Oh, sorry, I forgot the void. Alright, so a function needs to go public void. This indicates that there's nothing returning from this function. You don't need to worry about that at this stage. Just remember, this is whether it's private or public. We want it public because we want it to be able to be accessed from a different script. Void, nothing's returning, and then this name of the function with bracket bracket. Okay, so just save all my changes, go back to my game. Alright, so count starts as 1, which is what I would have expected to happen. Once again, an expected test. If I look over in my code, it's because right up here, I'm calling increase count, which increases it by 1 and then calls this function which displays it. So I'm just going to get rid of this again. We don't want to do that there because we don't want to start with a score of 0, but what we do want to do is we want to call increase count from over inside this script. So to do that, just show you how this could work, if I type in game manager dot, you can see because that function was public, I can now access it from here. Okay, so that would, if I save that now, if I go back to here and I click on play, what would you expect the score to be? 1. Okay, that's because over in my code, I'm calling this from within the start. Now we need to move this line of code to a different place. Where would you put it? Where do you think where do we actually want to call increase count? I'll give you 5 seconds to think about that. Okay, so hopefully you figured out that we want to chuck it into there. So this piece of code will still run. It will still make it. So this is when it. This piece of code is when it encounters a collision. So what that will do is it will turn off the visibility of the other object, the other game object, and then it will call from the game manager script over here the function called increase count. So if I load that up now, all right, it starts at 0. But every time I pick one up, it goes up. Now it's going to currently, when I get to 4, it says I win, but there's still 1 available. Now why is that? That's because I haven't quite finished with my code. So we're getting there. Alright, and that's because we've got this number 4 here hard-coded in. Alright, we don't want to use the number 4. We know that there's 5 pickups, so I could change that to 5, and that works perfectly okay. But what happens if I decide I want 10 pickups? I would have to change it then in 2 places. I would have to change that to 10, and I'd have to change that to 10. Alright, so, or if I decide that I only want 2 pickups, I change that to 2, and I want that to 2. That would work perfectly okay, but you can see how that's not as convenient and it's not flexible, because if I had a big piece of code, I might be using count multiple times, in which case I would have to go through and change this multiple times, which there's a chance that I could forget it once or twice, which means it's not very robust. Okay, so I'll give you 5 seconds to think about what do we need to put here instead of hard coding in the number. Okay, so hopefully you realize that all we have to do is take this variable, number of pickups, and paste that in down there, and it's the same, because remember, number of pickups equals 2. So if I go back to my game now, and I click on play, only 2 pickups, and as soon as I pick up 1, 2, it says you win. However, if I now go back to my my code, and I've decided that this is the next level, so I want there to be 4 pickups. That should be 9, so they're not all in the center. So we're at 4 pickups now, and I go back to here, you can see there's now 4. But the good thing is, once I've picked up 2, I no longer, because I only changed the variable once, remember, but it didn't say you win. I have to pick up all 4 because the code is now much more flexible and automatically changes as I change that one variable. Cool. The last thing we need to do is go back through our scripts and just make sure it's all commented up properly. So we'll just start from here. What does this function do? Increases the number of pickups collected. This one. Updates, capital U, update the count text and checks win state. Cool. Scrolling up, have nothing there. Alright. I could probably put a. I'm just going to put initialize the count and game text. That'll probably do. Cool. That's commented. Let's go over here. Let's tidy this up. We'll delete these sections that are commented out. Delete that. Alright. These lines probably deserve a comment because they're a little bit technical. Get a reference to the player's rigid body, and this one we'll put on the previous line. Get a reference to the game manager script. Commenting here. Variables for physics of player and reference variables. Okay, that's probably us.